Well, a pleasant good afternoon and welcome to 7 Eyewitness News right here on WIN TV. I'm your host, Sheldon Yearwood. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our online viewers at wintvworld.com. We're coming to you live from Lodge Park in Chaguanas. Well, Trinidad and Tobago lost a musical icon today in the likes of Mr. Bertie Marshall. Let me pause for a second because I'm sure there are many out there who know who this great man was. There are many who probably wish they knew him. And there are others probably wondering, who am I talking about? Well, this is the man responsible for our musical instrument, the inventor of the steel pan, Mr. Bertie Marshall. And of course, when we heard the news of his passing, there came a lot of mixed emotions with it. Shock, sadness, and even a smile because of the legacy that this man left with the steel pan. But I think the sad part for me was that many didn't even know who this man was. At least, not, let's say some, particularly the younger people. On the line this time, we have another great man in the pan fraternity, Mr. Ken Professor Fillmore. Mr. Fillmore, a pleasant good afternoon to you, sir.
Well, pleasant good afternoon to you too, Sheldon.
And,
it's so sad that, we had to talk, on such a sad day.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, I made the point, I don't know if you can actually, if you agree with me, that I started off the show stating that there are many who knew him, many who may have wanted to know him, and there are many probably didn't even know who he was. Do you agree?
I totally agree. As a matter of fact, I believe the majority in this country probably wouldn't know who is Bertie Marshall, First of all, I want to really say, my condolences from my family, and I go out to his family. What a great loss, Sheldon. This guy was a great inventor. He was an inventor of the instruments, a great pioneer. If it wasn't for people like him, it wouldn't have had people like me. And it's so sad. What a loss, a great loss.
Do you think that, because we know that he received 2 national awards and a recognition was given to him over the years, granted, but there has been this deafening cry from the culture fraternity, if you want to call it that, for more recognition. Do you think that in light of, in reflecting on his life, that more should have been done, not just for him, but for culture on a whole in TNT?
Of course, I'm in total agreement with what you said. Look up to recently here, Bertie had to be fighting for his little apartment that he had in Port of Spain there. And you know what I mean? I think a whole lot should be done. You see, like, for instance, on the school curriculum, we're supposed to have people like him for our children to know about. Who is Bertie Marshall? Who are our great icons in pan? I always say, Sheldon, we are like the Brian Lara. It's not only Brian Lara, it's a great hero of this country, but the players of the instrument that go all over the world. Pan is growing such like wildfire all over the world. As a matter of fact, I just came from 3 different continents. And we're supposed to educate our own, teach self about self. I'm sure that there's nothing about Bertie Marshall in the curriculum in the schools right now. And this is something we do need to address. People without culture is nobody at all.
That's not that you telling me about fighting up for an apartment. This man should be living the life, if you know what I'm saying. He shouldn't have to be struggling at all.
Well, that is so true. When you pass on, they will probably give him some accolades and so on. No, it's just like, it comes like the great Clive Bradley, the great Kitchener, Pat Bishop. When our great ones die, they die, they're gone and they're forgotten. We don't usually put things in place to educate our kids. I'm sure a lot of children in this country, a lot, the great majority, wouldn't know who is Bertie Marshall. And these are the little things that we need to put in place. Pan, just like Brian Lara, worldwide, the things that we do for this country, playing pan all over the world, through people like Bertie Marshall, as I said, it wouldn't have had people like me. But we are like the Brian Lara. We represent this country in such a big way, greater than many others that show their faces up. You know what I mean? Pan is a great thing worldwide, and I think yes, a lot more should be done in terms of us educating self about self. And again, I said, what a great loss to Bertie Marshall.
I remember my days playing steel pan. Actually, you might remember the days of Navet, the Panyard by Navet right there.
That's Motown.
Right, and I played there for some years. The double second I played and the guitar pan. Yes. And I'm looking back at those days now, and even though throughout the schools at that time, I said, man, they tried to push the steel pan, it was so difficult to get young people involved. And now we have people on the outside, other countries, playing pan like if they invented it.
Yes, of course. You know, I've told him, recently I've been to South Africa and I met a missionary and he was telling his band, he has a little steel band, and he was telling her that pan came from Canada. You know, even of the islands, people in Barbados believe that, you know, it was a Bajan that came to Trinidad and invented pan. Because we're not getting the facts straight. We are not cultured. How to put this, Sheldon? You know, we're supposed to be more cultured. Like how the Jamaicans are very patriotic people. They love Bob Marley. They love who they are. We need to get more on board where that is concerned. Pan is a great thing, as I said. A lot of Trinidadians who don't travel, or who might be ignorant to the fact, don't know how great the instrument is. There are hundreds, there are 300 steel bands alone in Sweden, Switzerland, and these places. I just came from Japan. Tens, you know, many steel bands. So we as a country, we don't know that we do these things great outside because we don't educate self much about self. And again, Bertie Marshall, as I said, this is a guy shouldn't be living like how he was living. I was discussing that with my wife because of the things that he had done. If it wasn't for him inventing the double tenor and other instruments, it wouldn't have had people like me. He should have been living like a king, but again, a man is never a king in his own castle.
On a fitting note to end this interview, Professor Fillmore, a pleasure having you on the line again, which was under other circumstances, but thank you nevertheless for your contribution, of course, to Mr. Marshall's memory, and of course, continue the great work that you're doing.
All right, thank you so much. Of course, I definitely will continue. Red, white, and black. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. The one and only Professor Fillmore shedding some light on the life of Mr. Bertie Marshall, and he said, I like how he ended it. A king of course, you know, gets really enjoying living in his own castle, and that is so true in light of what, you know, living in an apartment. I mean, this man should have never been living like this, and this is a constant problem that I have in this country, you know. So I'm dedicating today's program and the life and memory of Mr. Bertie Marshall, the inventor of the steel pan. When we come back from the break, we go to the rest of the news, including a special package or tribute, special story to Mr. Marshall's memory. Stay tuned. Welcome back to 7 Eyewitness News. Now, as a special tribute to Mr. Bertie Marshall, we're going to go until 6 o'clock on today. Of course, you know, we normally have the ODPM sponsor segment. Well, we're actually going to, you know, preempt that for next week. And today we're actually going to focus a lot of our attention on culture in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, in recognition of the late Bertie Marshall, we have a special treat for you on our Newsmaker segment, which will come up later on. You're going to see it. Of course, a video presentation by the man back in the day, showing exactly how to go about tuning the pan. Really interesting stuff indeed, and something for the young people to really pay attention to. We tend to focus on so much of the negatives in Trinidad and Tobago, and I bring up that point about the negative. I want to say this quickly. I was watching the various morning programs this morning, and someone called in a particular program, and I have to totally agree with the host of the show. And the man was making reference to the Hoop of Life program. Now, one thing I cannot stand, and I make no apologies for saying this, the blatant arrogance of some people in that, you know, whether you support whatever side, could be the government, the opposition, or a particular position, there's no need to be arrogant about it. And that's something I cannot. If something is right, it is right. If it is wrong, it is wrong. But in some people, just can't see it that way. And that's something I personally am not going to tolerate. And I heard this man talking about the Hope of Life program, whatever, and he said that he has an issue with the government giving this stipend to all these criminals, these 720 criminals, and giving this stipend. They should take some other approach. Now, this is my first. Number one, you are basically casting aspersions as if everybody in Laventille are criminals. You know, and that's the kind of arrogant statement I don't understand from some people. That is what you're saying, that all 720 people that applied for the Hoop of Life program or signed up for it, that they are criminals. And that's how it came across to me. And while I'm thinking this now, I'm watching the program just to hear, and from the time he responded, and I can say, actually, it was Paul on First Up. I'm like, correct is right. I mean, people really need to check themselves when they call in and want to comment on issues. Wrong is wrong and right is right. And it, again, despite it is a good program. Now, again, as into the longevity of the program and how successful it turns out to be, that depends on all parties involved, the participants, the government, the various NGOs, the various entities, business. All of that depends on the success of the program. So I'm not going to, predict how it will be in the long run, but it's a good start. So at the end of the day, when something good is good, it's bad is bad. So call a spade a spade. But again, there are some people who just cannot steer from that. I've bumped heads with a couple people already. Right? I make no apologies for saying that. Right? So again, there's a lot of good in this country. We could focus on that too, as well as at times. But some people just cannot stay away from the negativity that takes place. But que sera, sera. But as you start of our newscast, we just spoke with Mr. Camp, Professor Fillmore, about Mr. Bertie Marshall. I mentioned we're going to go through a whole program this evening, of course, dedicated to him. We're going to shift our focus of the news now and deal with some, critical issues taking place within the health sector. Now, the latest case of a brain surgery drill being soaked in water is the latest in a series of incidents of alleged sabotage of equipment at our nation's hospital.
But they placed it with the debris into the autoclave, and the autoclave caked everything and destroyed the drill. That was about $3 million the last time I remember. So at the end of the day, the drill from Eric Williams was destroyed unfairly, and also the one in Port of Spain was bought because they couldn't rent it. So that is where we are in this one.
Health Minister Dr. Fuad Khan. He said employees who were mandated to clean the drill were not doing so. This now begs the question, why? Well, though not wanting to cast aspersions on anyone in relation to this latest incident, Dr. Khan said it would be unfortunate if this was a deliberate act.
I would hate to think people are so inclined, and at the end of the day, all this occurred in protest action. So one has to be very careful how you deal with it. I've asked the chairman to find out exactly what happened and how it happened, because at the end of the day, if it is sabotage, we are going to deal with it in a very serious manner.
Dr. Khan says over the past few weeks, there have been several reports of equipment mysteriously malfunctioning in an attempt to cripple the health sector. He made reference to the chillers at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex, where workers are currently engaged in the sick-out action.
We have been finding also that the chillers, which is the air conditioner in Eric Williams, the suppliers and the people who have come to fix it cannot find the source of the problem. So it's obviously somebody is interfering with it. And so the air conditioner is going down, when they so desire.
Well, in a related story, would 55-year-old Rahil Hussain been alive today if the Port of Spain General Hospital had a functioning drill to do his brain surgery? Well, it's the question that many are asking in the public domain, and responding today, Health Minister Dr. Fuad Khan says there are many factors to consider. Speaking to 7 Eyewitness News, he says the CEO of the NWRHA has the authority to request that Mr. Hussain be taken to a private institution if it was an emergency case. However, that can be costly to the patient. Meanwhile, he says outside of that option, there are other alternatives doctors can examine in an attempt to prolong a patient's life until they receive the surgery. 55-year-old Rahil Hussain, a former foreman at the Ministry of Works, died on October 6th, 7 days after being hospitalized waiting for brain surgery. It did not occur because there was no drill to do the surgery. Dr. Khan said a full investigation has been launched into his death. However, not wanting to compromise the investigation, he says a patient's condition can change within minutes.
Treatment as it is, somebody could be looking very good today and in 5 minutes' time succumb to something else, not related to disease. So it has to be investigated and see exactly what is going on. One cannot make a blank, a sort of a whitewash board and say that this has occurred. It has to be investigated to see what was the cause of that. It may or may not have been the actual disorder that was diagnosed.
Meanwhile, addressing the exorbitant charges for services within private health sector institutions, Dr. Khan says those charges will drop once the public healthcare system starts running smoothly.
The healthcare system is supply and demand. That is why the only way to keep the private healthcare system down is to have a good public healthcare system that acts as a competition to the private healthcare. Once the public healthcare system is good, the private centers have to drop their prices to maintain their input.
Responding to reports of inadequate staffing at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex due to the SICOT action, Dr. Khan says contingency measures have been put in place. There have been reports that scores of patients are not being attended to.
Well, sure, it's not out of control. We have staff, and staff they are working. We have temporary staff working. People who are dedicated are pulling their weight, and things are working and happening. Maybe we may not be working as fast as necessary, but we are taking care of emergencies. We are taking care of a lot of people. Maybe a little longer, but it's happening.
Well, in some other news now, the Pan American Life Insurance Group is the new kid on the block in the local insurance industry. This after it acquired MetLife back in November. MetLife owned Algico and Algico in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. This acquisition has now extended Pan American Life Insurance geographic footprint in the Caribbean. The value of the acquisition was worth $120 million in 2010 and $675 million in assets. Chairman, President, and CEO of the Pan American Life Insurance Group, Jose Sequer, says this country has a good and solid rule of law, which is the ideal environment for any business to invest in capital.
I feel that there are certain outlooks for this country, including a potential new insurance legislation that I think will help the regulatory environment and enhance the regulatory environment in this country.
Sequer says the Caribbean is an important market for the insurance group, and he is promising to further invest in the local market.
The Caribbean will now represent 11% of our total revenue. And what that means is that it becomes a very important part of our strategy. We plan to invest here. We plan to invest in our people, in our facilities, in our technology, in our service platform, and in our new product offerings. So we're really looking forward to sharing some of the progress that we make with you.
Without drawing direct reference to the CL financial issue, Sequer says there has been concern throughout the region over the collapse of a financial conglomerate. He assures that the Pan American Life Insurance Group is solid.
There's still a tremendous trepidation about the impact of the financial failure of a certain conglomerate. And we have gone in there and shared our strategy, shared our vision, shared our financial strength, and the way we want to do business. And really, throughout the region, we've been very warmly received and welcomed by the regulatory authorities and our producers and agents.
Well, in this special report, many had the privilege of knowing him. Many wish they knew him, and sadly, there are many who, well, actually doesn't know who he is. His name, Bertie Marshall, the man who invented our national instrument, the steel pan. He died last night at the age of 76. Tonight, we take a trip down memory lane into the life of this musical icon. Cindy Raghavar tells us more.
When you have the first, see like a drum that is sort of sink in it, that big sledge. Then you draft out your notes. When you draft out your notes, then you have to groove it.
When your mind drifts to the sweet sound of the steel pan, remember the man who gave us this gift, the late Bertie Marshall. Marshall died at the age of 76 last night amongst friends and family. The man responsible for our national instrument has left behind him his legacy, the steel pan, our steel pan. Bertie is credited with not just the inventing of the double tenor instrument, but the introduction of harmonic tuning of the steel pan notes in 1956 as well. Speaking with 7 Eyewitness News this afternoon, Secretary of Pan Trinbago, Richard Forteau, said his iconic journey had a humorous beginning.
The birth of the modern steel orchestra at an early age. His first direct experience was when he tried retuning an old tenor pan from Tokyo. And may I tell you that he took that pan under the house where they were living, and he started a fire and he almost burned their house down. He was very good at the harmonica. And so this is what he listened and fashioned, to get the harmonics that he actually placed into the pan. So we can safely say the inventor of harmonics on the steel pan, Professor Bertie Marshall, has passed.
Bertie was born in Port of Spain on February 6, 1936. Spending his early childhood in Success, Laventille, he attended AC Primary and Tranquility Government Intermediate Schools. Not only a pioneer in the arena of music and steel pan specifically, but this man was a visionary in every aspect of his life to all those dear to him. He even received 2 national awards in his lifetime, in 1992 with the Chaconia Gold Medal and again in 2008 with the country's highest honor, the Order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. As an icon, he has left us, but his music will continue to live in our hearts. Play on, Bertie Marshall. May you rest in peace. Cindy Raghuba for 7 Eyewitness News.
You all heard where the man born? Laventille. Same place that this caller, another program, basically labeled everybody as criminals. I wish that man hearing me now. I mean, we need to think sometimes before we talk. You know, from Laventille, the man who, as he puts it, breaking it down for us, the harmony when it comes to the steel pan, that harmonic sound, Mr. Bertie Marshall from Laventille. Some people, check yourself. In some other news now, well, protest action this morning as the Banking, Insurance and General Workers Union came out with Carey workers to speed up the negotiation process. The workers are calling to remove those in management if they continue to not do the job that they were hired to do. The workers are demanding urgent and immediate attention as their very lives are at stake. We have more from Cindy Raghuba. We'll come back to the details and that story later on during the course of the newscast. Well, let's take a short break. When we come back, we have lots more news right here for you on 7 Eyewitness News. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
Here we come.
You ever hear people talk about the picturesque view from Laventille Hills, or even the picturesque view of the Laventille Hills? And the great Bertie Marshall came from Laventille. I'm going to be drilling that point because people tend to think that only bad comes out of Laventille. I said special tribute on the show this evening to Mr. Bertie Marshall. We'll take a course later on during the course of our newscast. Let's continue with more of the news. At this time, we return now to that story concerning the protest action that took place this morning as the Banking, Insurance and General Workers Union came out with Carey workers to speed up negotiation process. The workers are calling to remove those in management if they continue to not do the job that they were hired to do. The workers are demanding urgent and immediate attention as their very lives are at stake. We have again more from Cindy Raghuba.
We are just fed up. We have had it. We have had it. Normally these workers are quiet people. All right? And they decided enough is enough.
That says it all. The employees at the Caribbean Industrial Research Institute are at the end of their rope. This morning they embarked on protest action to voice the frustrations of the conditions they have to work under. The abhorrent conditions have led to a number of unfortunate effects on the health and well-being of the workers. Carey's branch president of the Banking, Insurance and General Workers Union, Gerald Herrera, spoke to the media today where he listed some of them.
Today it's at the end of a long waiting period of having to endure many unsafe conditions of work. Of late, as you look in the background here, this mushroom house was erected. Since then, people working in this vicinity have started to complain of things about like red eyes, itching, coughing, right? Rashes breaking out in the skin. And there's a petroleum testing laboratory, which since in 2004 has shown that there are about 4 people there with certain cancers.
Herrera stated that the union has written to management requesting a sit-down to discuss matters of contract negotiations and the critical issue of health concerns. They say their plight was met slightly as they were given a date of November the 1st.
This is serious health issues where workers are being affected. There are people here with cancers and their children have cancers, right? Some people who have left here have died, right? And you're telling me you will wait 2 weeks before you discuss it with the workers, right? We are saying enough is enough.
They are now calling on Minister of Planning, Economic and Social Restructuring and Gender Affairs, Dr. Bo Tawari, to intervene in the matter. The branch president added that if management cannot do their job effectively, then they should be removed. If nothing is done by the minister, they say they will go even further.
We are asking the minister will intervene because we want to work, but we cannot work under these conditions. We cannot, and we will not work under these conditions. Of this, you're asking me to work under these conditions, right? You have to be mad. I am saying that if the management cannot handle it, move them. If the board cannot handle it, move them. All right? And listen, if the minister, I am telling the prime minister, if the minister cannot handle it, move him too. Right? Move him because something has to be done. We will not take this anymore. We will not take this anymore.
Cindy Raghawa for 7 Eyewitness News.
On more health woes in TNT. Well, later on this evening, a Congress of the People will host the first part of a 3-part series of campaign debates. This as the COP has won their internal elections expected to be held on the 26th of October 2012. The debate will take place at Gaston Court in Chaguanas and commences at 7:30 p.m. The proceedings are aimed at a healthy discussion between competing candidates so that the public can scrutinize its members. Chairman of the Electoral Committee within the COP, Valence Rambarat, encouraged the public to follow the debates as this will allow them to have a better idea of what was taking place. Rambarat in a press conference yesterday stated they hope to take politics in Trinidad and Tobago to the next level. In some other news now, the 2012-2013 national budget was passed in the Upper House last night, and government is congratulating all those who have made it possible. These sentiments were expressed by Communications Minister Jamal Mohammed at the weekly post-cabinet media briefing earlier today. He stated the budget was one of the issues discussed at today's cabinet meeting.
We have to congratulate all members of Parliament in the lower house and in the Senate who contributed towards the debate, and all those who made the budget debate in the Parliament a very successful event, and it symbolized the democracy that's in operation in Trinidad and Tobago.
The minister went on to say that government was pleased with the response the budget received from the country.
The feeling that we are getting on the ground is that the vast majority of the people of Trinidad and Tobago appreciate the work that was done by Senator Larry Hawaii and the technical staff for the Ministry of Finance to produce a positive budget for and on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, just hours after government officials launched the Hope of Life program in Laventille area, a man was gunned down. Well, reports stated that around 9 p.m. last night, residents of Chumaka Laventille heard several loud explosions. On checking, they found 26-year-old Keon Hercules lying on the roadway in a pool of blood. He was taken to the Port of Spain General Hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. Hercules lived at Leo Place, Laventille. The homicide division is continuing investigations. The murder total now stands at 323. Well, this time, let's take a short break. When we come back, we take your calls at 665-6278. That's 665-6278. Again, this episode this evening in memory of Mr. Bertie Marshall. Great man indeed. Stay tuned.
Here we come, Laventille. Here we come, we're singing praises to your son, oh Laventille. Here we come, let me start the walk now. Somewhere up in Laventille.
Let's take your calls. 665, a tribute to Laventille, tribute to Mr. Bertie Marshall, a man from Laventille. So let's try and see the good in things as well. Caller on the air, pleasant good afternoon. Welcome to the program.
Pleasant good afternoon, Sheldon. Caller from Parabella.
How are you doing, man?
I would like to pay some tribute to Marshall Laventille. Wrong government has done with this man. Because if you check out the Calypsonians, people who sing wrong songs, bandit songs at this border. And I feel this is the record acting Laventille one. Give this family some good home that this man has had his tenure. Thank you, Sheldon.
Thank you very much. I got what you were saying, but your call was breaking up for some reason today, But I got a gist of what you were saying. Caller, a pleasant good day on the air. Welcome to the program.
Yes, Sheldon.
Hi, good day.
Good day, Laventille here.
How are you going, Mom?
I'm good. That guy who's talking about we in Laventille here, Sheldon. We are very good people in Laventille. We are hard-working people and people filthy rich in Laventille. You see all the big businesses in Laventille on the main road?
But let me tell you something.
We have PJ, we have Fernandez, we have Angostura. We are filthy rich in Laventille.
But let me tell you something, Stoney Line. Let me tell you something I'm going to reveal to the public today. My grandparents grew up in Laventille. I spent many vacations in Laventille, yes.
In Laventille, and we are people because I am a businesswoman in Laventille. I ain't take my business out of Laventille. I am a businesswoman in Laventille. So we filthy rich. And Sheldon, I want to tell you I was very disappointed with not seeing nobody represent us from the COP in Laventille meeting on Chumaka. I was very disappointed. And that is the people we voted for. They didn't put Jack Warner. They didn't put UNC on our ticket.
Yeah, I understand. On the ticket, yeah. Super ticket, yeah.
Prakash Ramada, shame on him. He neglected us in Laventille. We was very, very disappointed.
All right.
So let him do something about that.
Thank you very much. Interesting observation there. And of course, yes, again, somebody just got a message, somebody here. It's true, my grandparents on my father's side from Laventille, I spent many vacations up there. So come on, people, let's broaden our horizon and broaden our minds, you know. This kind of tunnel visioning, how we think about things. Not healthy at all. Caller on the air. Good evening. Welcome to the program.
Sheldon, good afternoon.
Good day to you.
Sheldon, it was so sad to hear about Bertie Marshall. But that man literally died of a broken heart, because you remember a couple of months ago when Gypsy and Dr. Glenn Ramadal Singh visited him, you know, he was complaining about not getting his national insurance, money that was due to him since 2009. He was having problems with his apartment. That even the gentleman who was looking after him said that he wanted to sell his award, you know, to help make ends.
I remember,
meet. It's really sad.
The thing is, and Confessor Fillmore said in the beginning, this man should live like a king.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right, Sheldon. It's such a pity that all these years, I think the only Calypsonian who might, I'm not putting goat mouth on anybody, who might end up dying like a king is Gypsy, because the man did something for himself. You know, and Sheldon, concerning the people of Laventille, one of my best friends came from Laventille, and she has migrated now with her children when the situation was getting really, really bad up there. And they have good people, because my father, when they came down from Rio Claro, originally from Rio Claro, they were living in Rose Hill. You understand?
Familiar,
so good people did come from there, Sheldon, and who want to be bad now, that's their business. And to the lady from Laventille, don't get vexed with the COP. The message was passed on to Mr. Ramadan, but I don't think that they were invited. That is why.
Oh, well.
Have a good evening,
yeah, these people, thanks a lot. And the thing is, you know, you have, for those who leave Laventille, I mean, you can't be upset with them if they choose to, because, again, probably they're very concerned about, not probably, but they are concerned about their safety. This is why, as a community, I'm looking at this black and white footage, and this is, of course, footage from back in the day. And I'm asking myself the question, on the outskirts of Laventille, a beautiful place on the hills of TNT, and yet on the outskirts, riches galore. What is happening? What is the breakdown? Because again, you have Mr. Marshall and others who came out of Laventille, did quite well. Right in recent times, of course, our very own soca artist, Destra Garcia, and there are so many others, athletes, you name it. What is going on? And the people need to come together as well and ask themselves that question. And they need to feed off the positive energy of people like Mr. Marshall and others who have done great things to Trinidad and Tobago. Feed off that energy, not the energy of the man of the cellular peace. Let's take another call. Caller on here, go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, caller.
Yes. Children, I have a little problem here this afternoon in thinking what is happening in our society. What I notice is that the present leader of the MSJ, he continues to meet with the PNM and so on to decide strategy against the present government. The other thing is that most of the board members from the MSJ are still on the boards appointed by the PP government. A former leader of the MSJ is the sitting Minister of Labour. He remains a member of the MSJ. And this present leader of the MSJ is having talks with the opposition leader against the government. I would like some explanation that if you can and explain something to me, maybe I missed something. Thank you.
All right, let me explain to you from how the Prime Minister stated it when this whole thing happened with the MSJ. Now, even though, Minister McLeod made it very clear that, remember, the MSJ was an entity of the People's Party government, right? One of the 5 elements of 5 parties that made up the People's Party government. Now, what they are saying, or what Minister McLeod said, even the Prime Minister, even though the MSJ, of course, in terms of the party, moved out, Mr. McLeod is going to continue representing the needs of the working class within the government as a member of the MSJ. So therefore, what they are saying, there's no conflict of interest in terms of Abdullah and the rest pulling out. He will remain a member in terms of, but along the lines of representing workers. That is where, again, if in the near future he chooses to pull out, that's one thing. But as it stands right now, if you want to say he's probably sending a message, and I'm going to remain a member and represent the working class as the Minister of Labour and as a member, and to represent the MSJ within the partnership still. So if that brings any clarification for you. But again, who knows, in light of how things have been developing with the MSJ, and just to kind of take you to that issue, of course, you know that they met PNM, MSJ, 17 entities, actually, trade unions, as well as other NGOs met, and they have decided to hold a mass demonstration. They met yesterday. A mass demonstration is 2nd of November, as they are calling for the removal, or the continued call for the removal of the Attorney General and the Minister of National Security. All right? So that's for the 2nd of November, 17 entities. What I want to try to do probably later on, if I want to have time, actually list for you those entities who are involved in this pact, of course, which includes the People's National Movement. Let's continue with your calls. Caller on here, go ahead.
Hello, Sheldon. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'd just like to say I enjoy your program.
Thank you.
And my children are looking on as well.
I'm glad they are.
You're saying Mr. Bertie Marshall, he invented the steel pan?
That's right. Let me just explain. Now, they see there's where the conflict. That's why I'm glad that children are watching. Yes, he did. Now, let me tell you along what lines, though. Now,
Okay.
even though there are various types of steel pan around, in terms of the developing the tunes and the harmony, the tuning and the harmony behind the steel pan and the invention of the double-second steel pan in particular, he's actually considered the man behind the music of the steel pan, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
So yes, in all essence, he is the inventor.
Because my children are saying Mr. Winston.
Right, exactly. Again, that's why I will play back the story for you in just a short while. I was done by Ms. Cindy Ragoba. In terms of the tuning,
Right.
or fine-tuning, what we call the modern steel pan, the notes and the fine-tuning of the notes,
Yes.
he was the one responsible. Like to say the icing on the cake?
Yes.
Right, he was responsible for that. The fine-tuning of the steel pan,
Right.
he was responsible for that, the modern steel pan, as they call it. So therefore, everybody played a part, but his part was very critical in terms of the fine-tuning of the steel pan in itself. All right?
Well, thank you so much.
Not a problem at all. Again, this is where history comes in, where our schools, our education system, and, you know, I really would hope that we had, you know, the full 2 hours today to really get some more into this, and even get people who were around back in the day with Mr. Bertie Marshall to call in and tell us about your experiences, because you're going to have children looking as, okay, they're going to be a bit confused. Okay, we heard about Winston Springsteen, we heard about now Bertie Marshall, but again, they all played an integral role into the holistic development of the steel pan in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's continue with the calls. Caller on the air, go ahead. Hello, good day, caller.
Hi, good day.
Yes, good day, welcome.
Hi, I'm a first-time caller. I don't know if you can help me with it's a problem that I'm having with the prominent school in Vistabella.
A school?
My daughter, she's in standard 1, right? And since the school term has started, she hasn't even made a full week in school.
What was the reason?
The first 2 weeks they had the strike, and then they had a problem with rats. And
where the school is in Vistabella?
Excuse?
In Vistabella, you said the school is?
Well, I wouldn't call him school.
Not the school. Sorry, the school where San Fernando Marabella. Where the school?
It's in San Fernando area.
San Fernando area. I wonder if the same school I got a report about 3 weeks ago. Could you text me the information? Just a reminder, a lot of these cases that are being texted me, I've actually forwarded already to several people. Some of you all I will need for you to come and see me on Saturday, so I will call you tomorrow and let you know what to do. If you can't make it, we can arrange something. Send me the text with your name and your phone number at keyword news. Text it to keyword news, NEWS. Leave a space, type in your comments, and send them to 1020. All right? The information.
Thanks so much, Sheldon.
No problem. Again, a reminder, the open house is this Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Yes, come and see me. Let me try and assist in whatever way I can to deal with some of your concerns. Let's continue with your calls. We have just about 5 minutes. Again, there's so much caller in the air. Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, whoa, I'm getting a feedback. Lower your television set, please.
Okay. No listen. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm calling.
All right, everything another call. Caller, do apologize. Callers, please be mindful when you're calling to please mute your television set. That happens when you don't. Caller, you're on the air. Go ahead. Hello, good evening, caller.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, a pleasant good evening. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, good evening. You're on the air. Go ahead.
What I would like to say with street signage, man in past, Bertie Marshall invent the boat phone, a special type of fan. I grew with him in Laventille. Bertie Marshall. He invented a special part. The boat phone was the name of that part. But with Street Simon was the
thank you again, because the more people calling who've actually lived that period, of course, will actually have more information, a lot more information. That's the thing. Sometimes those who we think are historians are not really historians, because you heard even the from Pantry Bay representative stated that in terms of that harmonic, that new harmonic tuning of the steel pan, they attributed that to Mr. Bertie Marshall. Of course, you have Mr. Winston Spree Simon, the inventor of the pan in the beginning. So again, there's so many people that contributed to the invention of the steel pan, because it's not just one steel pan we have. We have so many different variations, and everybody played their part in creating this beautiful instrument. Let's continue let's take 2 more calls quickly. Caller in the air, go ahead. Hello, good day, caller. Welcome to the program. All right, Loza caller 665-6278. We have about 2 minutes again. What we're going to do this time, okay, let's take one more call. I want to actually play most of the video for you till 6 o'clock. Caller in the air, go ahead.
Sheldon.
Yes, good day. Welcome.
Yeah, caller from Marabella. You didn't hear.
Yeah, sorry, the reception was a bit bad.
I want to big up Laventille, because if people big up Laventille, it might have less crime.
I agree.
And the next thing with Mr. Marshall, the past governments and the governments of today had neglected him, and I feel they should build a statue of him in Laventille and give his loved ones a new home in his passing. Okay, thank you, Sheldon.
Thank you very much. Well, from your lips to the ears of those who have that power, indeed. Again, so I want to continue this discussion again, tomorrow as well. I really want to get deeper, because again, you're going to have various spins on who invented which pan and what pan, and things. But at the end of the day, you cannot take it. Let me just quickly read for you again, if I have the story here. I'm going to bring it to you at 6 o'clock during the headlines. But again, the contribution the man made in terms of the tuning, or as I say, the modern day steel pan, the tuning of the modern day steel pan in 1956, and also the invention of a second tenor pan, undeniable. So yes, he is one of the inventors, and of course, in terms of the tuning, you can't take away what the man did for Trinidad and Tobago. Let's take a break. We're going to actually go to continuation of that video from Laventille and the life of Mr. Marshall until 6 o'clock, where we come back with our headlines. Stay tuned.
Laventille. Here we come, we come, we come, we come. We're singing praises to your son, son, son. Oh, Laventille.
So from that age, that young age, I started really. Because I played the harmonica. And harmonica helped me in later days because when I discovered harmonics, which is a new order, the order they use today in children's band, it's really harmonica, by hearing the overtones. And I started to experiment for a long while. And then about in 1956, I started to get the harmonics because I experimented for a while, you know. And I started to get the harmonics. And from there, Silver Stars and most of the bands come around me to tune the bands and things. But in those days, you know, there are no money and things.
After that, I started working on pan on stands, the second pan. I put them on, I made a wooden stand for it and hang it on the stand because it sounded better when it was hanging. I noticed when it rests on your leg, it kills some of the reverberation. I wanted a music chromatic bass on the road. So we couldn't put the pan around the neck on the road because we had to get the bass, and the bass contained 3 drums at the time. So you couldn't carry 3 oil drums around the neck. So we had to put it on wheels. So I put pan on wheels in 1956.
So I hope that clarifies a lot of the questions the children may have had actually about the whole issues around the steel pan. Like anything in life, things evolve. And the steel pan, that evolved as well. And you have to understand, and I mentioned that earlier on before the caller called in, that in terms of the modern day steel pan, the tenor pan and so forth, the double tenor, which of course is so popular around the world and right here in Trinidad and Tobago, at the front line for all orchestras as well, that is where this is where his invention was so critical. Winston Simon, yes, we all know, invented the steel pan, the original steel pan, but of course, with the evolution of the pan, Mr. Marshall, he, no pun intended, fine-tuned it. And here we are today. So yes, you know, call him, I still look at him as one of the inventors. So when I clarify that, yes, he is an inventor. He is one of the inventors of the steel pan, the modern day steel pan, as the steel pan continues to evolve. And I hope that with that evolution, we do not continue to lose our own to foreign countries. That is my major concern. So children, when they go on the internet and you're searching for stuff, don't just go on YouTube to watch rap videos, hip-hop, dancehall. Look for that as well. YouTube it. Type in his name. Let us go now to our 6 o'clock headlines at this time. The latest case of a brain surgery drill being soaked in water is the latest in a series of incidents of alleged sabotage of equipment at our nation's hospitals.
But they placed it with the debris into the autoclave, and the autoclave caked everything and destroyed the drill. That was about $3 million the last time I remember. So at the end of the day, the drill from Eric Williams was destroyed unfairly, and also the one in Port of Spain was bought because they couldn't rent it. So that is where we are in this one.
Health Minister Dr. Fuad Khan, he said employees who were mandated to clean the drill were not doing so. This now begs the question, why? Well, though not wanting to cast aspersions on anyone in relation to this latest incident, Dr. Khan said it would be unfortunate if this was a deliberate act.
I would hate to think people are so inclined, and at the end of the day, all this occurred in protest action. So one has to be very careful how you deal with it. I've asked the chairman to find out exactly what happened and how it happened, because at the end of the day, if it is sabotage, we are going to deal with it in a very serious manner.
Dr. Khan says over the past few weeks, there have been several reports of equipment mysteriously malfunctioning in an attempt to cripple the health sector. He made reference to the chillers at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex, where workers are currently engaged in sick-out action.
We've been finding also that the chillers, which is the air conditioner in Eric Williams, the suppliers and the people who have come to fix it cannot find the source of the problem. So it's obviously somebody is interfering with it. and so the air condition is going down, you know, when they so desire.
Well, in some other news now, the Pan American Life Insurance Group is the new kid on the block in the local insurance industry. This after it acquired MetLife back in November. MetLife owned Algico and Algico in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. This acquisition has now extended Pan American Life Insurance geographic footprint in the Caribbean. The value of the acquisition was worth $120 million in 2010 and $675 million in assets. Chairman, President, and CEO of the Pan American Life Insurance Group, Jose Sequer, says this country has a good and solid rule of law, which is the ideal environment for any business to invest in capital.
And we feel that there are certain outlooks for this country, including a potential new insurance legislation that I think will help the regulatory environment and enhance the regulatory environment in this country.
Says the Caribbean is an important market for the insurance group, and he's promising to further invest in the local market.
Caribbean will now represent 11% of our total revenue. And what that means is that it becomes a very important part of our strategy. We plan to invest here. We plan to invest in our people, in our facilities, in our technology, in our service platform, and in our new product offerings. So we're really looking forward to sharing some of the progress that we make with you.
Without drawing direct reference to CL Financial, Sequer says there has been concern throughout the region over the collapse of a financial conglomerate. However, he assures that the Pan American Life Insurance Group is solid.
There is still a tremendous trepidation about the impact of the financial failure of a certain conglomerate. And we have gone in there and shared our strategy, shared our vision, shared our financial strength and the way we want to do business. And really, throughout the region, we've been very warmly received and welcomed by the regulatory authorities and our producers and agents.
And finally, ministers of government are insisting that they have been paying their dues to the Children's Life Fund. This comes amidst reports that the person who was in charge of the fund had quit because ministers were not paying their dues. Asked to respond to this at a post-cabinet media briefing, Minister of National Diversity and Social Integration, Clifton Decoto, said this is not true.
Well, I'm certainly continuing my contribution to the Life Fund. I don't know about my colleagues, but I feel assured that they are.
Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar set up the Children's Life Fund shortly after coming into office. It was set up to help those unfortunate children who are in need of medical treatment. Communications Minister Jamal Mohammed also supported statements made by Minister Decoto. He said to date, money from the fund has been used to help children in need.
All ministers of government are contributing towards the Children's Life Fund, and the fund is in existence. The leadership and the management of the fund, we will have to discuss that at another time.
Well, at this time, we take a short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Kevin Rattiram for Eye on Legal right here on WIN TV. Stay tuned for lots more.
Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to Eye on Legal here on Eyewitness News. I'm your host, Kevin Rattiram. Thanks for joining me this evening. Well, today on Eye on Legal, I'll be going solo. My intended guest this evening, something came up with him last minute and he's unable to be here. But I'm going to be holding the fort. Now, today on Eye on Legal, we'll be chatting about agreements for the sale of land. Agreements for the sale of land. You know, very often people decide to purchase land and they don't enter into a written agreement. And as a result of that, you know, later down the road, problems arise and they regret having or not having put their agreement into writing. So we're going to talk about agreements for the sale of land. Very, very, very important when you are purchasing land, or in fact, any property, any real estate, any real property, land or building, anything of that sort. And we're going to look at some of the main terms or clauses that ought to be included in such an agreement. So viewers, we're going to take a break, and as soon as we come back, we're going to chat about agreements for the sale of land. Don't go away. You're viewing Eye on Legal here on Eyewitness News. I'm Kevin Rattiram. Back in a moment. Welcome back. You are viewing Iron Legal here on Eyewitness News. This evening on Iron Legal, we are going to be talking about agreements for the sale of land. And you know, viewers, it is very, very common when persons are buying land, they do so without entering into a written agreement. They do so without consulting a lawyer and getting legal advice and inquiring or ascertaining what the legal implications of buying land are, or the legal implications of entering into an agreement to buy land are. And many a time they do it simply because they think it's unnecessary, they think it's burdensome, they don't have time to go to a lawyer, seek legal advice and so on. And, or simply they may just be trying to save money. And oftentimes when they do that, they realize in the long run that they may be, if they may find themselves in a position where they may incur a greater loss and greater stress and inconvenience than if they had simply gone to a lawyer initially and paid maybe $1,000, $2,000 to have an agreement for the sale of land done by a lawyer. Because let's face it, when you buy land today, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get land, let's say a lot of land, for anything less than about $50,000. Many areas, a lot of land goes up to $200,000, $250,000 or even more. So whilst you may think it's unnecessary to go to a lawyer and spend a couple of $1,000s to do an agreement for sale, which is what it's called, really it's a small price to pay when you look at the amount of money that you're putting out for the item you're purchasing in the long run. So take my advice. If it is you are buying land, regardless of how much you're spending on it, go to a lawyer and have an agreement for sale done. Now that is one thing. Very often as well, when someone is buying a parcel of land or someone is selling a parcel of land and they are dealing with another person, the vendor is the person selling and the purchaser is the person buying. Sometimes the vendor may say to the purchaser, well, you know what? You could come by my lawyer to do the agreement for sale. Okay, I have a good lawyer and he'll do up an excellent agreement for sale. And, you know, I'll get him to give you a discount. We can even share the cost of the agreement for sale. Come to my lawyer. Well, I strongly advise against having one lawyer represent both parties in any transaction, be it a land transaction, be it purchase of a car, employment contract, anything. Because really, a lawyer cannot properly seek the interest of two parties, generally speaking. The thing about it is, clauses can be placed in an agreement for the sale of land, which can be beneficial to the vendor or which could be beneficial to the purchaser. So if it is you are buying land, you are the purchaser, and you go to the lawyer for the vendor, there's a very real possibility that that agreement for sale that you will enter into and sign can actually lean in favor, if I may put it that way, lean in favor of the vendor. So it is very important, whether you are the vendor or the purchaser in a transaction for the sale or purchase of land, you should get your own lawyer to represent your interest. Now, in agreements for the sale of land, generally, the purchaser gets his lawyer to prepare the agreement for sale. That's the general practice. The purchaser, the person buying, gets his lawyer to prepare the agreement for sale. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that you, the vendor, if you are selling, have to agree to everything that is in that agreement for sale that's been prepared by the purchaser's lawyer. What I would advise is that if you are the vendor and the purchaser gets his lawyer to prepare the agreement for sale, you, the vendor, should take a copy of it. Don't sign it yet. Get a copy of it from the purchaser and then take it to your own lawyer. Show it to your own lawyer and say, what do you think of this? Is it fair to me? and your lawyer may say, well, I don't like this clause, I think we need to make a change here or there. It's not uncommon as well that the two lawyers will actually communicate with each other, the lawyers for both parties. They may pick up the phone and say, listen, you know, I'm looking at this agreement you did, and I don't like this clause. Can we change it and put in this or take out this, something like that? Very, very often that happens. And at the end of the day, they arrive at an agreement for sale which is fair to both sides. So, very important, go to a lawyer and also go to your own lawyer. Don't go to the other party's lawyer, okay? So, the agreement for the sale of land, what does it entail? What are some of the main provisions, some of the main clauses that are included in such an agreement? Well, very significant, very necessary is that you must describe the land that is going to be purchased. You must describe in detail the land that is going to be purchased. And how is that done? Well, very often the land will be owned via a deed, and we all know what a deed is. And at the back of the deed, close to the end, there is something called a schedule. And the schedule of the deed describes the land. It will describe the acreage of the land, be it in square feet or you know, hectares or whatever, roods or perches. These are measurements which are used to describe acreage of land. So the first thing it will describe is how big the land is, the size of the land. Very important as well are the boundaries of the land, the boundaries. And the schedule usually describes what is to the north of the land. For example, it may be referred to lands owned by John Brown. It may refer to a road reserve 10 meters wide. It may refer to a specific road with a name, the Eastern Main Road, the Southern Main Road, things like that. So the schedule will specify the size of the land, and it will specify what bounds the land on the north, south, east, and west. So it is a means of specifically identifying which parcel of land you are buying, because the size of land is one thing, but you can have an acre here, you can have an acre here, you can have an acre here. So if you agree to buy an acre, which of the 3 acres are you buying? So that's why it's important for the agreement for sale to refer to the boundaries, so that anyone who is buying, anyone who is selling will be clear on the specific parcel or piece of land that is being bought and sold. Very often, the agreement for sale will recite the boundaries of the land, and it may also refer to the deed by which the land is currently owned. It may refer to deed number 00104 of 2012. So if the current owner bought the land via deed 00501 of 2012, then it is appropriate, it is advisable that the agreement for sale set out specifically that deed number by which the land is currently owned. Sometimes in the deed as well, there may be a plan, a surveyor's plan at the back of the deed. And that plan at the back of the deed will show the area or the land in question. It may be shaded, it may be colored pink and things like that. So the agreement for sale will refer to the size of the land, it will refer to the boundaries, it will refer to the deed, and depending on if the land is shown in a plan, either the plan of the current owner or a plan of a previous owner in a previous deed, the agreement for sale can refer to that plan and that deed. It is crucial that your agreement for sale be specific enough to identify for anyone, both parties, and especially a court of law, if the matter goes to court, to identify which piece of land exactly is being bought and sold. Okay? So that is one of the main provisions of the agreement for sale of land. just an important point here before I go on further. An agreement for sale is not a deed. They are two completely different legal documents. An agreement for sale is just an agreement. It is not the document by which you, the purchaser, become the owner. The document by which you become the owner is called the deed. Okay? So the agreement simply puts into effect or simply spells out what are the terms agreed upon by the parties for the purchase of the land. It does not transfer ownership of the land from the vendor to the purchaser. That comes down the road via deed. Okay? So it's important to understand that at the beginning of every land transaction, when you enter into an agreement for sale, you do not become the owner then. All right? You become the owner down the road, usually within 90 days, 3 months, when a deed of conveyance is prepared, signed by both parties. Only then do you become the legal owner. Now, what are some of the other terms or clauses that should be included in the agreement for sale? Well, the purchase price is absolutely necessary, okay? The total price that you agree to buy the land for or to sell the land for must be included. And that's the term that is used. It's referred to as the purchase price. So if you decide to buy a lot of land for $100,000, the purchase price is $100,000. The agreement for sale will specifically set out what that purchase price is. Now, is it that you are going to buy this land and you are going to pay the entire purchase price up front? Are you going to pay the entire $100,000 when you sign the agreement for sale? No, highly unlikely. The normal practice when you sign an agreement for sale is that you don't pay the entire purchase price. You pay a portion of it. The normal amount, which is referred to as a deposit, is 10% of the purchase price. Very important for you to understand that, 10%. So if you are agreeing to buy a piece of land for $100,000 and you are going to enter an agreement for sale, you may find the vendor, the person selling to you, saying, well, you know, pay down half, pay down $50,000. I would strongly advise against making such a large down payment. The normal down payment is 10% of the purchase price. And what is the reason for that? The reason for that is that before you really fork out much of the money or a large portion of the purchase price, you need to be sure of certain things. And I'm going to come to that in a little while. And you cannot be sure of those things at the outset of the transaction. You cannot be sure of those things at the time you enter into the agreement for sale. You are only sure of those things down the line, down the road. So that is why it is not advisable that you pay too much of the purchase price initially, because if it turns out that certain things which should be in order are not in order, and the vendor decides he's not going to give you back his money, give you back your money, or he takes your money and absconds with it, you are in serious, serious trouble. So remember, at the outset of a land transaction, when you enter into an agreement for the sale or the purchase of land, you should pay down 10% of the purchase price. So if you're buying land for $500,000, pay down no more than $50,000. If you're buying land for $1 million, pay down no more than $100,000. And that amount which you pay down is referred to as the deposit. Okay, it's referred to as the deposit. So you pay down a 10% deposit, working with the figure of $100,000, you'll pay down $10,000. And when is it you pay the balance of the purchase price? When is the $90,000 paid off? Well, usually agreements for sale provide that the balance of the purchase price, or the $90,000 in this case, has to be paid off within 90 days or 3 months from the date on which the agreement for sale is executed. So let's say today is what, the 17th of October, if I recall, is it the 17th? Then if you sign an agreement for sale today, I think it's the 18th actually, if you sign an agreement for sale today, then you would have until the 17th of December, November, December, January. You would have until the 17th of January 2013 to complete the transaction and pay off the remaining $90,000. So general rule, you pay down 10% on the date that you execute or sign the agreement for sale. So if you were to do that today, the 18th of October, the balance is payable within 3 months, namely by the 17th of January 2013. So we're in October, November, December, January. So you have 3 months to do the needful, to do the checks that you will have to do, and I'm going to come to that in a little while. You have 3 months in which to go to the bank, to go to the credit union, and to secure your loan. So that is why generally there is a time lapse between the beginning of the transaction and the closing of the transaction. That's what is referred to as the closing of the transaction. And in those 3 months, you have the opportunity to do the needful, to put your house in order, get your loan. Sometimes if you are buying a property, in order to get the money to buy that property, you may actually have to sell another property which you have. If you are buying a house, you may have to sell the house that you are currently living in order to get the money to complete the transaction. So this window, this 3-month window, the 90 days window, affords you that opportunity to put your house in order. If it is you have to sell another property to realize your funds, get your loan or whatever, you have the 90 days to do that. We're going to take a break, viewers, and when we come back, we'll chat some more about the provisions for an agreement for the sale of land. Don't go away. You're viewing Ion Legal here on Eyewitness News. Back in a moment. Welcome back. You are viewing Ion Legal here on Eyewitness News. This evening we are discussing agreements for the sale of land. Now, after you enter into the agreement for sale, you sign it, both parties sign it, the vendor, the purchaser, and you, the purchaser, you pay down your 10% deposit. What then is the next step? Well, your next step is to do a search on that land. It's called a title search. Now, usually this is done through your lawyer. Your lawyer will have somebody called a search clerk who will go to Port of Spain, I believe it's in the Red House, and they do a title search on that land. What is the purpose for this title search? Well, really, it serves 2 main purposes. One, it tells you the search, the results of the search will tell you who is the current owner of the land. Okay, very, very important. Because let's say somebody comes to you and his name is Tom Smith, and Tom Smith says, hey, I'm the owner of this parcel of land, and here I have a deed, and this deed shows I'm the owner, okay? So I want to sell you this parcel of land for $100,000. You agree to buy it, and you pay him your 10% deposit and so on, and you still have 90% of the purchase price due and owing. When the search clerk goes to the Red House and does his search now, what does he find? He finds that Tom Smith was the owner of the land, which is why he has a deed, but he subsequently sold that land to Jane Brown. So whilst Tom Smith may have been the owner of the land, he's no longer the owner of the land. It's now owned by Jane Brown. So obviously, Tom Smith cannot sell you that land. He's not the owner. You cannot sell what you do not own. So the only way to really identify the owner, the current owner of a parcel of land, is by doing that search. And of course, all these deeds, when people buy land via deed, all these deeds are registered. So this is why when you do a search, all the deeds relevant to that parcel of land will come up. In fact, the land clerk, the search clerk, actually gets copies of the deeds for the current owner, and he can actually go back sometimes decades, 10, 20 years, to see who was or were the previous owners of that land. So it's very important to do that title search to identify or to ensure that the purported vendor, the person claiming to be the owner, is really the owner. Okay? First reason why that is done. Secondly, it is done to ensure that the land doesn't have what is called encumbrances on it. An encumbrance is something like a mortgage. Okay? And if it is, the land is mortgaged, then you certainly should not be buying that land, because it means that someone else, usually a bank or a credit union, has what is called an interest in that property. So a search, a title search, will also show up if there are any encumbrances on that land, such as mortgages. So if it is, a search is done on the land and it shows up that that land is mortgaged, that really ought to cause alarm bells to go off where you are concerned, a purchaser, because you don't want to buy a piece of land. Next thing you know, the vendor, the guy you bought it from, defaults on his mortgage payments, and the bank comes now and wants to seize your land and to sell that land, because that is what they are entitled to do under a mortgage agreement, a mortgage contract. So very important, you need to ascertain that the purported vendor is actually the owner of the land and is in a position to sell to you. And you need to ascertain that the land you are buying is free from encumbrances. And that is why in the agreement for sale, one of the terms that the vendor agrees to is that he agrees to sell the land free from encumbrances. So in that agreement for sale, he is giving an undertaking that when he turns over this land to you at the end of the 90-day period, there are not going to be any mortgages on that land, no monies, no loans are owing on that piece of land. He is giving it to you, selling it to you, free from all encumbrances. So that is a very important clause that is included in the agreement for the sale of land, that the vendor undertakes that when the transaction is completed, the purchaser will purchase the land free from all encumbrances. Okay? So, search. You get back your search. Now, how long does it take to do a search? Well, searches generally don't take very long. I would say at most a search, a title search for a piece of land should take about 2 to 3 weeks. All right? So 2 to 3 weeks is an average time. We can even push it as far or as long as a month. Now, what happens if you execute your agreement for sale and within a month you do your search and you get back the results of the search, and it shows that the search is clear. There are no encumbrances on the land, and the purported vendor is actually the owner. So everything is in order, and it's okay to purchase that land. Do you have to wait until the 90 days? Well, the answer is no. Generally, the 90 days is given for the purchaser to put his house in order. So if it is, you do your search and everything is in order, and you have your money, you have the balance of the purchase price, the other 90%, using my example, you have the other 90,000, the remaining 90,000. Nothing prevents you from closing that transaction. I'm sure the vendor will have no objection to that because he is getting his money, the balance of the purchase price, quicker. So you don't necessarily have to wait for the full 90 days, the full 3 months. That would just be the maximum amount of time that you, the purchaser, have to get your house in order, to get your monies and so on, to close the transaction. So once everything is in order, nothing prevents the transaction from being completed or closed earlier than the 90-day period, which is provided for in the agreement for sale. Now, when you are now ready to close the transaction, to complete the transaction, what happens? Well, the agreement for sale usually provides that the purchaser's lawyer, okay, the buyer's lawyer is the lawyer who will prepare the deed of conveyance. And the normal practice is that the purchaser is the one who pays the full legal cost, all the lawyer's fees for preparing that deed of conveyance. So it is always advisable that the parties include that so that there will never be any uncertainty as to what is going to happen to close this transaction. Okay? It is always advisable that you state specifically who is going to prepare the deed of conveyance. So usually it states that the deed of conveyance will be prepared by attorney Mike Singh or George Thomas or whoever, and the purchaser will bear the full cost of the preparation of this deed of conveyance. Okay? So at the end of the 3-month period now, or if it is you are completing or closing the transaction prior to that, then your lawyer, the purchaser's lawyer, does the deed. And who signs the deed of conveyance? Well, it is always advisable that both parties, the purchaser and the vendor, should sign the deed of conveyance. Sometimes it is done where only the vendor signs. That is perfectly permissible in law, but I always advise that both parties should sign the deed of conveyance so that there could never be any question as to whether what is contained in the deed of conveyance was in fact agreed upon by the parties or not. So the purchaser's lawyer will prepare the deed of conveyance. The purchaser will pay in full for the deed of conveyance, and both parties, I advise, should then sign that deed of conveyance. Again, the deed of conveyance is signed at the same time the balance of the purchase price is paid to the vendor by the purchaser. So using my example of 100,000 again for the parcel of land, 10,000 paid up front. When they are ready to complete the transaction, both parties, the vendor and purchaser, will usually get together at the office of the purchaser's lawyer, the lawyer who prepared the deed of conveyance. The purchaser will have a check, usually a certified check. I always advise that big transactions involving large sums of money, managers or certified check be utilized. The purchaser will hand over the certified check to the vendor for the balance of the purchase price. The vendor will give a receipt to the purchaser for the balance of the purchase price, and then both parties sign the deed. At that point, the vendor's obligation really ceases, okay? And it is now up to the purchaser's lawyer to register that deed of conveyance and to get back from the Registrar General's department what is called a certified copy of that deed of conveyance. It's important to understand, viewers, that when you get your deed registered, the actual document that was signed by both parties, the original, you never get that back. When that is registered by your lawyer at the Registrar General's department, either in Port of Spain, and now it can also be done in San Fernando, the Registrar General's department keeps that original. And within about, let's say, a month to 6 weeks, after the original is registered, they will give back to your lawyer a copy of that deed of conveyance, and it is referred to as a certified copy. And when you get it back, it is at the front of it, it is going to have certified copy, deed number, whatever, whatever. Each deed will be given a number, and at the front of the deed, it will bear that number. And at the back of the deed, there are going to be a couple additional pages which have been attached by the Registrar General's office and which have been stamped by the Registrar General's office. And that now is what you, the purchaser, get to prove that you are now the owner of this parcel of land. You get from your lawyer now a certified copy of the deed of conveyance, and you take that home, you keep it safely, and that is what is your proof that you are now the registered owner of that parcel of land, and you can do what you want with it. You can now sell it, you can rent it, you can lease it, you can take a mortgage on it, anything. You are the owner at that point. Now, couple very important things that I need to tell you in terms of the agreement for sale. There are certain clauses that are put in case either party defaults. Now, there is usually a clause which is put in which states that in the event the vendor does not provide what is called a good and marketable title to the land, or he cannot sell the land free from encumbrances. And of course, this means either he can't prove that he's actually the owner of the land, or the land has like a mortgage or something on it which cannot be removed within the 3-month period. There is usually a clause inserted that the vendor will refund the purchaser his 10% deposit. Okay? So if within the 3 months the vendor doesn't do the needful, if the land was mortgaged and he doesn't pay off the mortgage and so on, or he cannot really prove that he is the owner of the land and therefore entitled to sell the land, he has to give back the purchaser his 10% deposit. What I always do and what I would advise is that you include not just a clause to that effect, that the vendor will refund the purchaser his deposit, but he will refund the purchaser his deposit plus interest at the existing banking rate. Because if you, the purchaser, took your money, paid it to the vendor, the vendor now takes your money and puts it in the bank, keeps it 3 months, gets interest on it, and then comes and says, well, here, look back your money. Isn't it fair that you should have gotten the interest that your money would have accrued during that 3-month period as well? So I always advise viewers that if it is, when you're doing the agreement for sale, you should ensure that your lawyer inserts a clause stating that if the vendor doesn't do what he's supposed to do, he will refund your deposit plus interest at the existing banking rate. I mean, these days banking rates, interest rates are very low, 1% and 0.5% and things like that, but you never know. I mean, depending on how much money it is you put out, it could add up to a substantial amount of interest, okay? Another clause that ought to be included, and this one is included in the event that the purchaser defaults on his obligations, namely that within the 90 days, he fails to pay back or not to pay back, he fails to pay the vendor the 90% or the balance of the purchase price. In a case like that, a clause is usually inserted stating that the vendor is entitled to forfeit the deposit. And what does that mean? He's entitled to forfeit the deposit. Well, it means he's entitled to keep the deposit, not give it back to you. So if you enter into an agreement to buy a parcel of land for $100,000, you, the purchaser, sign the agreement for sale, you pay down $10,000 as a deposit. The agreement provides that you're supposed to complete the transaction within 90 days, i.e. you're supposed to pay the balance of the purchase price or $90,000 within the 90 days, and you do not pay the $90,000 by that 90-day deadline, the vendor who is selling the land is entitled to now keep that $10,000 deposit that you paid at the beginning for himself, doesn't have to refund it to you, and he can now go and sell the land to somebody else. Okay? So 2 main provisions which ought to be included in the agreement for sale. One, if the vendor doesn't provide a good and marketable title to the land, or the land is not free from encumbrances, then the purchaser should be entitled to a refund of his deposit plus interest. On the other hand, if the purchaser defaults on his payment of the balance of the purchase price, usually 90%, then the vendor is entitled to keep his 10% deposit paid at the outset and sell the land to someone else if he so wishes. So viewers, there you have it. Unfortunately, we are out of time. And there are some other clauses that some lawyers put in, some lawyers don't put in. But these that I went over this evening are the main or the fundamental clauses which, in my opinion, should be included in every agreement for sale. If you have these clauses in the agreement for sale, it is generally fair to both sides. And at the end of the day, that's the type of agreement we want, fair to both sides. It imposes obligations on both parties, and it imposes penalties on the parties if they fail to perform those obligations. All right, so there you have it. Just to let you know, next week, Thursday, I'll be back in on Iron Legal again. My guest next week, Thursday, should be Attorney at Law, Miss Judy Kubral Singh, and we should be discussing some issues pertaining to property settlement between husbands and wives, including common law husbands and wives. So be sure to tune in for that. So there you have it. We are out of time, as I said. You've been viewing Iron Legal here on Iron Legal on Eyewitness News. I'm Kevin Rattiram. Have a good evening.